Marvel and DC Chaos, Dumbledore powers unleashed across universes. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 1. In the desert, a figure appeared from nothingness, and then fell down by gravity, stirring up a burst of yellow sand. Bah! Bah! Russell spat out the sand in his mouth, and then looked at the endless desert around him with a confused expression, completely unaware of what was happening. Didn't you bungee jump in the Grand Canyon, and then the unlucky rope broke and smashed into the water? Why is there nothing to do with the body, and still comes to a desert? Did he awaken the spatial teleportation ability in Teleporter? As a film and television lover, his first reaction in his heart was this movie. Because the protagonist in this movie survived at the critical moment of falling into the ice, awakened his ability and teleported to other places. This is extremely similar to his current situation. In the next second, Russell, who was a little excited, began to fantasize about the location of his home in his mind without hesitation. Phew! With the hot wind, the yellow sand was raised, and then Russell, who stood motionless, was fed a mouthful. The atmosphere was a little awkward, and he didn't teleport at all. And at this moment, the sound of mechanical gears turning suddenly sounded in his mind. Ding! Traces of crossing detected. Origin world creature crossing detected. Start gifting system. System random. System OK. Ding! Character simulator starts to be released. Binding successful. Comes with a system starter package. Continue. Crossing the awakening of biological talent. Ding! Successful awakening talent. Dual realm rover. This service ends here. As the sound of mechanical gears turning disappeared, Russell woke up from his state of hair. At this moment, all the information about the character simulator system and the talented dual realm wanderer was already loaded in his mind. The first is the dual realm rover. According to the loading information, he knows that the world he is in today is in Marvel. And after 2359 on 29 days, he can go to DC World. In the same way, after staying there for a month, he can return to Marvel. Of course, crossing is not mandatory. It's just that after the countdown of time, he can choose to go to another world, and it is no problem to delay for as long as it lasts. It's like a door locked with a lock, and the lock opens after 30 days. When to open the door after that is up to Russell to decide. At the same time, the good news is that the time flow rate of the two worlds is not the same. For example, when he was at Marvel, the DC world was almost frozen. And when he was in DC, Marvel's side was almost frozen. That way, he doesn't have to worry about missing something or going off track in his plans in the future. Perfect. Russell snapped his fingers happily. After reading the talent information, Russell began to look at the system's capabilities, and after a few seconds, he couldn't help but get excited. Compared with talent, the system is the foundation of his life in these two worlds. The so-called character simulation system means that Russell can use redemption points to draw prizes, and will randomly get character cards from other worlds, and then each simulation will get part of the opponent's ability. Until he has the full abilities of the character card, he can run the next character simulation. Of course, the simulation is not infinite, but once a day, and each time it also costs redemption points. The source of the exchange point will occur as long as Russell interacts with those heroes or villains. As for how much, it depends on the degree of Russell's influence on the character. The greater the impact, the more ruthless the trouble, and the higher the points. If it's just passers-by and engagement is low, then there will be very little. As for not participating, there are no points. At this time, Russell finally breathed a sigh of relief. Whether it's Marvel or DC, these two worlds are too unfriendly for ordinary people. Not to mention the usual small fights, big events are also endless. Ordinary people simply live like ants. Life and death all depend on the fate of heaven. And with the character simulation system, he at least has the foundation to settle down. By the way, I still have a newbie package that I haven't opened. It's a really intimate system. Russell sighed, and then said directly in his heart, I'm going to open the newbie package. Ding! The gift package is open. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a Harry Potter World character card. Friendly reminder, the first simulation will get 100% of the character's power. Do you want to turn on simulation? Yes/no. Seeing the prompt, Russell became a little nervous in his heart. Not because of anything else, but because the difference in the power of the characters in this world is too large. Although the Harry Potter world looks like a low magic world on the surface, it is actually a completely underrated world. And the reason is that the real big guys in it have too few shots. If Harry and Hermione's strength level is 3, then Sirius, Snape and others have a level of about 5. Voldemort's level is a little higher, about 8. But on top of this, there are two more behemoths. That was Dumbledore and the first generation Dark Lord Grindelwald. These are two monsters, and the peak strength of the two when they were young can definitely reach 10 or even higher. As for the ancient wizards Ravenclaw, Gryffindor, Slytherin, and Hufflepuff, these four will definitely be even more terrifying. Therefore, Getting the character cards of ordinary characters and getting the big guys is simply a heaven and an underground. But since it's a newbie package, I guess it shouldn't be too bad, right? Of course, even if you can't get the big guy, you can bring me Professor McGonagall or Snape's. In the next second, after praying a few words, Russell, who was in a nervous mood, chose to start the simulation. Ding! Harry Potter World character card opens. This time the character is Albus Dumbledore. Episode 2. In the desert, Russell almost jumped with excitement. He didn't expect that he would directly win the first prize Dumbledore. And once he has all the strength of the other party, then he has a certain self-preservation ability in the Marvel world, and he does not need to tremble and fear at the beginning. The next moment, the sound of the system continued to come. Ding! This simulation begins. In 1881, you were born in Godric's Valley, England. In 1892, you enrolled in Hogwarts and joined Gryffindor House. In the summer of 1899, you just graduated and planned to travel around the world, but due to your sister's magical riot, you had to stay in Godric's Hollow, and accidentally met Grindelwald, and then developed into a lover relationship and made a blood alliance. In the winter of 1899, due to the fight between Grindelwald and Absford, I don't know who accidentally killed his sister Ariana, after which Grindelwald fled, and since then you broke with each other and parted ways. In 1900, you suddenly came to your senses and returned to Hogwarts as a professor of transfiguration. In 1938, you met Tom Riddle at the Wool Orphanage in London and brought him back to Hogwarts. In 1945, you defeated Grindelwald and got the Elder Wand. In 1956, you became headmaster of Hogwarts and refused Tom Riddle's request to return to work in defense against the dark arts. In 1961, you discovered the 12 uses of dragon blood, and you were successful in alchemy with Nicole Flamel, and for this you received the Order of Sir Merlin. In 1974, you secretly organized the Order of the Phoenix to resist Voldemort. In 1981, Harry's parents were killed by Lord Voldemort, so you put each other in foster at the Dursleys. In 1997, you were killed by Professor Snape with a death charm on the school astronomy tower. In an instant, Dumbledore's long 115-year wonderful life was completed in just a few seconds in Russell's mind. And whether it is learning magic or releasing magic, it is as if he experienced it himself. Ding! The first simulation was 100% successful. You have obtained all of Dumbledore's powers. In the next second, I saw an incomparably huge magic burst out from Russell's body, dragging him into the air like a nebula. At the same time, all the magic that Dumbledore possessed began to load. Transfiguration, phantom transfiguration, fascinating, fire curse, fluorescent flashing, illusion charm, alchemy, call god to guard, thunderclap. Except for almost all white magic, there are even a lot of black magic such as fire spells. But this Russell is not surprised. After all, Dumbledore served as a defense against the dark arts professor, which is quite normal. More than 10 seconds later, Russell slowly fell from mid-air, and his eyes couldn't stop being full of surprise. Because at this time, he is no different from the peak version of Dumbledore. Even under the influence of the system, the shortcomings that would have required casting with a staff have been removed. Although wizards in the Harry Potter world can also cast spells without wands, their power will be greatly reduced, far less powerful than wands. And now, Russell can do the same intensity on his own as when he unleashed magic with his staff, and more freedom and flexibility. Looking at the blazing sun above his head, Russell couldn't help but try. Clear water like a spring. As he stretched out his finger and lightly tapped it in front of him, magic suddenly emanated from between his fingers. Then something magical happened. I saw the incomparably cool spring water gurgling out from Russell's fingers, as if there really was a spring there. Under the scorching sun, Russell drank a few sips and suddenly felt that the heat all over his body dissipated, and he was extremely comfortable. This is real water, not the kind conjured by transfiguration. It's magic. After sighing, Russell intends to continue experimenting with other magic, and the desert situation is suitable for now. However, just when Russell made a move, he suddenly stopped and looked at the front not far away with a vigilant face. He clearly felt the spatial fluctuations. Could it be that Gu-Eat discovered me as a stowaway? Shall I run? Russell was a little tangled. Although he has the phantom transfiguration as an escape weapon, he feels that as long as he can't run out of the Earth, it will be difficult to escape the other party, who is also a space master. The title of Supreme Mage is not just talk. As for teleporting to other planets, such as the Nova Empire, it is also impossible. Although he knows the space picture, the long distance across the galaxy will definitely drain his magic, and it will definitely not reach. Let's see you first. If the other party is not kind, I will not be late to run. Russell made up his mind and planned to meet each other. In fact, in the end, the main reason why he didn't run is because the other party in the movie is not a bad person, but a communicative existence. If he had changed to another dimensional demon god, he would have run away long ago. But in the next second, the circular portal that Russell expected to shine with sparks did not open, but instead appeared a cuboid transparent orange portal. The next moment, a group of soldiers who were fully armed and had strange short sticks hanging from their waists came out of it. Until the last burly black woman came out of it, the portal closed automatically. Then the female black man seemed to think that Russell was not a threat at all, directly ignored him, and then calmly took out a palm-sized instrument from her waist. However, after taking a look, her brows furrowed slightly, revealing a look of surprise. It turned out to be a non-standard unknown timing violation, which I haven't encountered for a long time. However, the inclination rate of time development is quite stable, and there is no big problem. After saying this, the black woman put away her frown, turned to look at Russell with a proud face, and said in the tone of a judge prisoner, "Time offender has been determined. Now, on behalf of the Time Mutation Authority, I formally arrest you on charges of violating the Holy Timeline." Episode 3. I didn't expect that the TVA was the first to find me. Russell narrowed his eyes slightly, a little surprised in his heart. But this surprise was only for a moment. Russell immediately understood that it was most reasonable for the other party to appear. After all, he is not from this world, and his arrival will definitely change and shake the current timeline. If the Time Variation Authority were not waste, it would definitely be detected. And by this time he already recognized the black woman on the opposite side as the Commander B-15. But he's not Loki's scrap. In the next second, a dangerous light appeared in Russell's eyes. What if I say no? Hearing this, the B-15 not only did not have the slightest panic on his face, but mocked. "We have even captured gods, not to mention you are a human being. I really don't know what to say." The next second she sneered and gently waved her arm. According to Article 132 of the TVA Code, if there is time to resist, you can cut it on the spot. Do it. The time guard had been waiting for the order for a long time, and when he heard the words of the B-15, he immediately took out the short stick on his waist, opened the cutter, and surrounded it according to the training formation. The B-15 stood still, as if supervising. After all, in her eyes, this is just a boring action, and it is not worth doing it herself. However, what she didn't expect was that in the face of the siege, the ordinary human on the other side not only did not show a scared expression, but showed a cold and disdainful smile to her. That look is like looking at a dead person. In an instant, B-15 felt a strong sense of unease in his heart, and this uneasiness reached its peak after the other party raised his arm, which made her heart tremble. As if understanding something in an instant, the B-15 immediately reached out and touched the controller on his waist, and at the same time roared out of his mouth, "Back off." However, it was already late, and with the man raising his arm slightly, the world of flames descended in an instant. I saw a long river of flames coming out of thin air, and then tumbling away like a torrent, roaring and engulfing all the creatures in front of it. In the blink of an eye, including the B-15, all the time guards were engulfed in flames. A few seconds later, listening to the absence of a sound in the flames, Russell's heart jumped slightly. It won't be too hard, will it? Because I have only seen the strength of the Time Guardian in the TV series before, but now it is in reality. Therefore, it is not easy for him to determine the specific strength of this group of people, and the Agni curse is all out as soon as it is shot. And now, it seems that some force is too much. In the next second, Russell stopped the fire spell with a wave of his hand, and then he saw 7 or 8 charred corpses falling to the ground. It's really the same waste as in the TV series. Russell was a little speechless. Originally he wanted to torture the other party, but he didn't expect that they were all burned to death. As for the killing, Russell did not appear psychologically burdened. He is not the virgin, since the other party wants to cut him, then he is an enemy. No, it's still one less person. Russell glanced again and found that the body of the B-15 was not here, and it seemed that he opened the portal and escaped the moment he cast the spell. 3 seconds ago, in the Time Mutation Authority in the quantum realm, a portal opened without warning. In the next moment, a woman covered in flames and a terrifying tongue of fire burst out from inside at the same time. However, due to the forbidden nature of TVA, these flames quickly turned into particles and dissipated in a short period of time. At this time, the portal had been closed, and the B-15, which was covered in burns, fell to the ground extremely miserably and breathed heavily, his eyes full of fear. Just a little. If you stay in that hot flame for another second. No. Even if she stays for half a second, she will definitely be burned to death. Even if she comes back, if the TVA can't help the devil, she will die. Damn it. How could it be a high wizard? At this moment, B-15 was madly scolding Miss Time in his heart. Why is such a powerful person with such a low time inclination and almost killed her? At this time, the other time guards had already discovered the seriously injured B-15, and then quickly took the other party's tens of thousands of medical rooms. 10 minutes later, B-15, with no visible scars on her body, knocked on the female judge's door. "Say, what kind of time did the criminals almost wipe out your entire army?" Due to the death of 8 time guards and the serious injury of a search captain, the female judge Lavana was very dissatisfied with the outcome of the trip and spoke in a bad tone. Hearing the question from his superior, the B-15 forced himself to reply, "We have encountered a high wizard, and the other party's flame spells are too terrifying to resist. If it weren't for my experience and good luck, I wouldn't have had a chance to escape back. Saying that, B-15 gritted his teeth and said again, I want to know why Miss Time didn't prompt. We are not mentally prepared at all. She is responsible for this operation. Listening to this complaining tone, the female judge frowned. She didn't blame Miss Time in her heart, but she felt strange. After all, it had not been a long time since this level of time had happened. And why was the time tilt not high at that time, just like an ordinary time branch? The female judge thought for a moment and then spoke. Can you determine the identity of the other party? Is it an important person in the sacred timeline? B-15 shook his head. I don't know. I'm guessing it's a stowaway from other parallel universes. Hearing this answer, the female judge's brows tightened. Until a few seconds later, as if having made a decision, this woman directly said coldly, it is incumbent upon you to guard the timeline and quickly assemble the time guard to capture it again. If you can, try to be alive. B-15 heavy head. Yes. Episode 4. Inside the hall. Seeing that the tilted growth of the time branch was still so conspicuous, the female judge was relieved in her heart. Although the other party is very powerful, fortunately this time offender does not know how to hide himself like the female Loki, which saves a lot of trouble. The next moment, the female judge nodded to a man with a scar on his nose. Mobiuston understood and immediately waved his hand and said loudly, once again, the time guard has powerful fire magic. Please pay attention to the order to resist in time during the battle. Now, go. As the words fell, orange portals opened, and a large number of heavily armed time guards rushed out. In the desert, a man is crouching next to the corpse of the time guard fiddling with the broken time controller, seemingly studying something. The next moment, a large number of time guards appeared from portals in all directions. Then, there were 200 time guards, forming a circular formation and gradually encircling inward. At this time, the surrounded figure had noticed the situation, and it seemed a little nervous to see so many people. Then he jerked his arm up, as if he wanted to do something. Seeing this, the B-15, who was on the periphery of the encirclement, jumped in his heart, and seemed to recall the fear of being dominated before, and immediately sent an order without hesitation. Turn on the time shield, maximum power, never save energy. In an instant, all the time guards raised their left arms at the same time, and suddenly energy surged from a button-like generator, and then orange transparent shields appeared instantly. Seeing this, the man in the encirclement seemed to have discovered the role of the shield, so he did not continue to cast spells. Seeing this, the B-15 was not surprised, but continued to order, speed up and surround him. The order was issued, and hundreds of time guards trained in an orderly manner while raising their shields and began to run quickly, closing without a trace of superfluous movements. In an instant, 200 warriors ran together and brought up a large amount of sand and dust, which looked extremely powerful. At this time, the man surrounded in the middle seemed to be frightened by this scene, and actually stopped the action of releasing magic, looking left and right extremely nervous, seemingly not knowing what to do. However, such a scene made Mobius tilt his head slightly, his brows furrowed, and his eyes were full of doubts. The next second, he couldn't help but remind. Something is wrong, B-15. The B-15 can be in its current position, naturally there is a certain level. At this moment, she also felt that something was wrong with the time in the encirclement. But the arrow was on the string, had to be sent. And the position of the other party is exactly the same as the position locked by the TVA. There should be no problem. 3 seconds later, the encirclement was already only more than 30 meters away from the man in the middle, and the time guards could already clearly see the slightly frightened expression of the time prisoner. Many people were immediately determined. The next moment, a new command came from the tactical headset of the all-time defender. Throw the catch net and establish a stand. As soon as the order came out, most of the time the guard immediately stopped, and at the same time reached out and touched his waist. Then these people held special grenades-like objects and threw them hard into the middle. Bang bang bang. It was not the sound of explosions, but the flickering energy nets that opened up, fell densely towards the man in the middle, and then wrapped each other layer by layer. At the same time, the time guard, who had not thrown the capture net before, took out the palm-sized boxes and placed them on the ground. The next moment, blue light bursts from each box, and then quickly links envelop the center area. From a distance, it looks like a huge regular 64 polygonal blue prism standing on the ground, and those capture nets covering the man's body immediately echoed and shone with a deep blue light. In an instant, it seemed that the weight had increased dozens of times, and the man was immediately pressed to the ground by hundreds of nets and could not move. Seeing this scene, the B-15 in charge of the command was obviously relieved, and then turned to look at Mobius next to him and smiled. It seems that we are overthinking, Mobius. Maybe the flames he released before consumed too much mana, and his actions just now were to trick us into retreating, but fortunately we weren't fooled. This time we have won. However, Mobius, who was standing next to him, did not show a smile, but his face was stiff, and his face was covered with sweat in a short moment. What's wrong with you? As soon as the B-15 asked, he instinctively felt that something was wrong, and after looking at the other party's line of sight, his heart suddenly jumped wildly. Then in the next second, she heard a curious voice behind her. "Excuse me. What have you won? Can you talk to me?" The voice is so strange yet so familiar. Although it was smiling, it was as terrible as coming from hell, and in an instant the B-15 felt a chill rushing from the tail vertebrae to the brain, and the scalp was numb. Now, she finally knew what Mobius saw. That time offense. The time offender, who should obviously be captured by the gravity net, was standing behind him like a ghost at this time, quietly watching her. Episode 5. At this moment, a huge fear arose in the heart of the B-15. Pitfall. This is the other side's trap. It turns out that they are the prey, and the time criminal is the hunter. But even so, at this moment the B-15 was not thinking about how to save his life, but about saying the order to stay away from the headset. She wants the Guardians of Time to run away. But before she could open her mouth, the person behind her seemed to have guessed what he was going to say. "It's late." Russell smiled, then raised his right hand and snapped his fingers. In an instant, the invisible magic power emitted fluctuations, and the magic power in the body made by the transformation technique that was pressed under the gravity net began to change rapidly under the control. The next moment, dark blue flames burst out from inside. "You shouldn't get too close." As Russell's voice fell, the fierce fire fell with a bang and began to spread rapidly around. Seeing that the flames were still erupting, B-15 was relieved in his heart. TVA's energy shield especially restrains the energy damage of flames. In the distance, the time guards also quickly raised their energy shields again as soon as the flames appeared, without forgetting Mobius' warning before departure. "At this time, I never thought that we were ready and had a chance." For a while, the B-15 was already thinking in his mind about how to fight back, even if he died. However, the next moment, her pupils suddenly enlarged and trembled, and her body couldn't help but tremble. "I saw that the blue flame was silent, but it ignited the energy structure the moment it came into contact with the energy shield. And the time guard, who stood behind the shield, did not even scream this time. Under the erosion of the dark blue flames, they turned into flying ash almost instantly. In the blink of an eye, all the 200 time guards formed by Chang died. "It's over." At this moment, the B-15's eyes were straight, and there was no luck in his heart. Some were just boundless regrets. Roar! Suddenly, a beast roar appeared from the flames, and the sound shocked B-15's heart, and he suddenly fell to the ground. At this moment, boundless fear appeared in the eyes of this once proud black man. She saw that the blue fire that had become incomparably huge began to roll violently, and a huge evil dragon waved its wings and condensed from the fire, as if it came from hell. Then the dragon never hesitated to come towards him. Russell looked at the roaring flame wyvern with a calm face. There are only two ways to extinguish the fire curse. First, there is nothing to burn. The second is to use another spell, and at the moment, the first rule obviously does not apply, because he does not intend to kill Mobius yet. He still keeps the other party useful. The next moment, Russell raised his arm without hesitation and spread his 5 fingers. "All curses are over." Rumble. The furious magic from Dumbledore suddenly emanated at this moment. In an instant, the desert under Russell's feet lit up with golden light, looking extremely sacred. The fierce fire in the distance seemed to sense the danger, roared and increased its speed, wanting to devour all life. "Disappear." As Russell spoke softly, those golden rays quickly transformed into yellow flames, and in the blink of an eye, they became like a tsunami and pounced on the blue fire dragon. Screams appeared. The fire dragon that condensed the fire wanted to escape from the sea of fire, but no matter how it struggled, its body was always entangled by the spread of yellow flames. Until the end, it was completely pulled into the fire and never moved again. Seeing this, Russell stopped exporting mana, and the sea of fire completely dissipated in a few seconds. After doing all this, Russell turned his head to look at B-15, who was sitting on the ground with a dull face, and Mobius, who was too stiff to make an escape move. "Seriously, I overestimated your combat effectiveness. I didn't expect you to be really so weak." Russell shook his head. He thought that with the first fiasco, the second roundup would be a powerful guy. As a result, he stood in the sky and watched for a long time, and it turned out to be a few high-tech means, which were not worth his trap at all. On the side, Mobius heard this mockery with a helpless wry smile on his face, and he didn't understand why Miss Time didn't have any prompts. At this time, Russell waved his hand, and the sand under his feet formed vines to trap the B-15, and then he looked at Mobius and asked, "Haven't you captured powerful time criminals before?" "But I heard this woman say that you have caught the gods." Mobius didn't hide it, just replied embarrassed. "A time criminal as powerful as you has never met. As for the gods, the one we caught the most was Loki, the god of trickery. But IMHO, although they have the most surprises, most of them are not very smart." Hearing this, Russell narrowed his eyes slightly. To be honest, he watched Loki before he crossed before, and he felt a little strange in his heart. Although the TVA's Forbidden Demon Realm looks powerful, their time guard is really weak, and it looks like a well-trained soldier. After thinking about it, Russell asked again, have you captured any other Asgardian royalty besides Loki? Mobius also thought about this when he heard this, and then shook his head. Except for Loki, there is no one else. Hearing this answer, Russell finally determined in his heart that Kong who was hiding at the end of time definitely had a ghost. The Guardian timeline that the other party said is A. Will there be a powerful time criminal? There will definitely be. But TVA will always catch the weak and ordinary people. And a lot of Loki, or rather, everyone else is a cover-up, and only Loki is Kang's target. At this moment, Russell thought about the ending in Loki again, and at this time, what the other party said may be a lie. Suddenly, Russell's heart jumped, thinking of a possibility. Maybe that Kong didn't stay there voluntarily, but was imprisoned or something, and couldn't leave, and only death can allow him to escape from the end of time. Phew. Russell let out a long breath. Whether it was for the exchange point, or whether the other party really had a conspiracy, he did not intend to let the plot develop normally. The next moment, Russell showed a rather friendly smile to Mobius. Mobius looked at the time prisoner who was obviously lost in thought, and began to think in his heart whether to take the opportunity to escape. But the next moment, before he could make up his mind, he saw the other party showing him a scary smile like a hungry wolf looking at a rabbit. Especially the other party's 2 rows of Sinran white teeth looked particularly terrifying under the sun. Then he heard the other party laugh and say something even more terrifying to himself. Dude, do you like traveling to the void? Episode 6. Although Mobius didn't know where the void land was, it wouldn't be a good place to hear it. So cautiously and tentatively asked, can I refuse? Russell nodded without hesitation. Of course, look what you said. My favorite thing about this person is to subdue people with virtue. How can I force others? While speaking, Russell smiled slightly and raised his fingertips, and suddenly a flame formed and danced on it. So, what is your choice? Mobiuston looked grim and said with a serious expression, I just said and laughed. In fact, my favorite thing is traveling. Do you want me to go now? Seeing that the other party was so heartfelt, Russell nodded in satisfaction. Of course it's now. By the way, give me your time controller and the cutting stick. Mobius did not dare to resist and honestly handed over 2 items. And then the next second, Russell unscrewed the cutter and plunged into Mobius's chest without hesitation. Looking at the other party's gradually dissipating body, as well as the complex expression of horror, anger, and puzzlement, Russell just shrugged his shoulders. You'll thank me, Mobius. By the way, I'll give you another suggestion. Don't trust TVA. I'll go to you one day later. And before that, find old Loki and say that one day in the future I will let him see his brother again, and he will take you to live when he hears this. As Russell's last words fell, Mobius disappeared completely. In fact, Russell did not expect the other party to listen to him. It was just his move, or an experiment, because when Mobius goes to the Void Land, he will be shocked that he will not die after being cut. This is a smart person. Combined with all his previous questions, he will definitely have doubts about TVA. It's a pity that he doesn't have a meditation basin. He can't let the other party see his covered memory, and he won't be the soul-snatching curse in the 3 unforgivable curses. Otherwise, the plan would be simpler. Of course, this matter became the best, and he had nothing to lose if he failed. Then, it's your turn. After speaking, Russell looked at the black woman with a smile. What are you going to do? The B-15 looked at Russell with a hard look and anger in his eyes. It's just a borrowing from you. Russell didn't hide it in the slightest. What? Relax, it's just a gadget that doesn't matter. Inside the Time Variation Authority, suddenly, a portal opened, and then a figure fell from the door and fell to the ground with a thud. The female judge, who had been waiting for the results in the hall, quickly rushed over, but her face immediately changed. The B-15, who had been seriously injured half an hour earlier, returned, but this time the other side could no longer heal the injury. She's dead, and on the other party's body there is also a line of writing. Say hello to the guardians of holy time for me. The female judge's face became gloomy, and her eyes were full of anger. It was the first time she had seen such an arrogant time criminal. But now that the time guards sent out are completely destroyed, she does not dare to act without permission again. Moments later, the female judge took the elevator and came to a dark and gloomy space. At this time, the fog cleared, and the lizard man sitting at the top spoke. Ravonna Rensrel, why did you come without our call? The female judge was half kneeling on the ground and did not dare to raise her head, and then explained everything carefully. Unknown timing of suspected high wizards? No wonder I whitelist all the powerful creatures, and there will be a time branch slope. It seems to be a stowaway from other universes. At this moment, the lizardman's self-talk fell in the heart of the female judge, but it was like a thunderbolt on a sunny day. What is whitelisting? Aren't all time criminals who produce time branches caught and then cropped? And just when her heart shook, a majestic voice came from ahead again. Lavana, look up. Hearing the order, the female judge instinctively raised her head, and then saw a pair of red glowing eyes. In an instant, all the previous memories of the female judge were sealed, and new false memories were implanted in it. After a dozen seconds, the red glow disappeared. Lavana Rensrel. This time it was the lizard man sitting on the left who spoke. The female judge bowed her head slightly and made a listening gesture. Great guardian of holy time, what are your orders? The lizard man smiled satisfactorily and continued. Recall all time guards, after which Miss Time will baptize them. The female judge did not ask why, but nodded and left. The end of time. Kong in the castle began to think in his eyes, but after a moment he just shook his head. He had just used a machine to observe the future through the temporal power of the quantum realm, but he didn't see the stowaway. He couldn't understand it, but there was nothing he could do. It doesn't matter, after all. Only Loki is the key. The next second, Kong knocked on the desktop, and suddenly a cartoon clock projection with a simple smiley face appeared. What are your orders, those who remain? Miss Time asked with a grin. Kong was expressionless, didn't care about the other party's tone, and said directly, after going back, add this stowaways to the whitelist, and then rewash the memories of everyone in TVA, and then continue as originally planned. Remember, don't touch that stowamon without my orders. Miss Time bent down slightly to salute. Obey. In the desert, Russell waited for a few more hours, but it was almost dark and there was time for the guards to return. It's a pity, it's all exchange points. Part of the plot where all his actions have changed before. There are already 363 redemption points in the system. Unfortunately, this still takes 637 points to unlock the new character card. Russell speculates that this may be due to the fact that the plot about Kong is still a long time away, and his changes have not yet affected the future, so there will be so little. Forget it, or get out of here first. However, just as Russell was about to leave, he suddenly turned his head to look. It turned out to be at this point in time. Within his line of sight, he clearly saw a figure walking with difficulty. Then Russell didn't know what to think, and a kind smile appeared on his face. The sun was already tilting to the west, but Tony Stark didn't have a smile on his face. Although the desert is extremely hot during the day, it is also dangerous at night. He had no more clothes and no way to start a fire, and his weak body was likely to lose temperature at night. And hypothermia is a terrible thing. But just when he was anxious in his heart, his eyes suddenly lit up. Person. He saw another man in the desert. In the next second, he ran towards the other party without hesitation, expecting the other party to take him out of the desert. At this time, the person on the other side also seemed to see him, and actually waved his hand, and Tony became even more excited for a while. A few minutes later, Tony ran to the other person panting. At this time, he had already seen that the other party was a man wrapped in white, and he suddenly thought that the other party would definitely be able to take him out of the desert, because he remembers that the natives here like to wear it. However, before he could speak, he heard the other person speak in English. Congratulations, Mr. Tony Stark, you've been kidnapped again. Kidnapping? Tony's eyes widened, as if he didn't understand, or couldn't accept what was going on. And before his mind turned, he saw the man opposite him raise his sandbag-sized fist. Bang! Russell took off the white gauze turban that had deformed from his head and looked at Stark, who fell to the ground unconscious with a happy smile on his face. Not bad. One punch knock out. Iron Man achievement complete. Episode 7. In the dimly lit cabin, Tony's eyes tied to the chair were full of confusion. Killing him did not expect that he would encounter a second kidnapping. He really couldn't understand what was wrong with the world, and it seemed that the bottom line of morality was gone all of a sudden. And just when Tony doubts life, Russell, as the initiator, is humming a song outside the ruined house while unleashing magic. Muggle banishment curse. Although this is now a no man's land after the war, he can't guarantee that Nick Fury will search for this place, otherwise it will be another trouble. After doing the guarantee, Russell put on a headscarf, leaving only 2 eyes outside. Then he transformed a mirror and looked at it to make sure there were no loopholes before approaching the house. Want water? Russell asked, holding a kettle. Tony nodded quickly. He was dying of thirst, and he couldn't get out of breath. After drinking most of the pot, Tony finally felt a burst of relief. The next second, he looked at the masked man in front of him and said straightforwardly, "Say, how much?" Russell shook his head. Seeing this, Tony seemed to have thought of something, and immediately sneered and asked again. "Stark Industries missiles?" Russell shook his head again. "This is not a matter of that. What do you want?" Tony shouted angrily. Russell wanted to show a gentle smile, but unfortunately there was a face towel blocking it, and the other party could not see it. So Russell gave up and spoke in a gloomy voice. "I want you. You dream, I won't give in." Tony Stark instantly turned pale, frightened that the other party actually piqued at his beauty, and suddenly felt that his end was coming. Of brains. Russell finished the second half of the sentence with a twitching face. Damn, it's worthy of playing with the flower, Stark. The head is really dirty. At this time, Tony also knew that he had misunderstood, but the other party's words still made him feel a pang of horror. Unexpectedly want your own brain, what kind of pervert is this? In contrast, at this moment, he even felt that the militants who had imprisoned him before were too friendly. "Brother, I am HO, my brain is no different from someone else's," Tony said slowly and kindly in an extremely sincere tone. "You may not know, from a medical point of view, Everyone's brain is made up of gray matter and white matter. Furthermore, they are actually made up of nerve cells. And the brains of mammals such as pigs, cows and sheep are also composed of nerve cells. In this way, my brain is equal to the brain of a pig, a cow or a sheep. The next second, Tony's words changed. So it's better like this, I'll give you $100 million, you buy him hundreds of thousands of cows, enough for you to eat brains for a lifetime. How do you look? Promise, I'm almost convinced by myself. Tony looked at the mysterious man in front of him with great anticipation. What kind of logical clown is this? Russell is simply powerless to spit on. Hee hee. Russell responded with a sinister laugh. Stop struggling weakly, Tony Stark. Do you know how precious a brain cursed by knowledge is to wizards? For me, it can be practiced into a potion and eaten, so that I can better control witchcraft. This is something that cannot be exchanged. Hearing such a bizarre answer, Tony was completely shocked. What the hell is this unfolding? Unlucky, I won't be kidnapped by a psychopath, right? However, the next moment, Tony's eyes widened and his mouth opened. I saw that in front of him, the mysterious man just gently swiped in the air with his hand, and suddenly flames and clear water appeared. As if to convince him, first, the flames fell on his body, making him feel hot pain. And then Qing Shui Huan descended to extinguish the flames, making him feel cool. And that's not all. Then he clearly heard the other party say the spell recover as before. Then he was shocked to see the ruins around him that were attacked by artillery fire automatically flew up from the ground as if going back in time, and then combined into a complete wall again. At this moment, Tony Stark firmly believes that the 38-year-old materialist edifice has completely collapsed. There really are wizards, Tony muttered, then looked at the other man with a pale face and asked, so, are you really going to boil my brain in a crucible with green bubbles? Very imaginative. Looking at the other party's convinced expression, Russell almost laughed crazy in his heart. Of course, he will not take out the other party's brain. At the moment, everything is just a play he plays. His purpose is to make the other party interested in magic, and then let the other party escape by carelessness and accident. After that, he will do the next step in New York. And the current situation that is about to be taken away by the wizard will definitely make Tony remember. In short, everything is about drastically changing Tony's life in order to get exchange points. Now that Tony Stark is convinced, Russell is going to perform next. Yes, like you said, not just your brain, but also the tail of a mouse, the claws of an owl, the eyes of a goat, the heart of an Austrian wyvern, and sugar, spices, and good taste. Not only that, but also with magic flames. Toot toot. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. At this moment, the atmosphere was exaggerated, and Stark, who was already distraught, was frightened by the knock on the door and screamed like a little girl. Affected by Stark's infection and a sudden knock on the door, Russell couldn't help but scream. For a while, a horror movie seemed to be playing out in the dimly lit cabin. Squeak. The next moment, under the sparkle of the sun, a bright bald head pushed open the door. She poked her head out, looked at the two with a confused look and asked, "What happened?" Episode 8. Bald head, yellow coat. Supreme Mage Gui, depend on. This big guy really found it. No wonder his own muggle banishment spell outside didn't react at all. At this moment, Russell felt a tingling in his scalp, and the whole person suddenly quieted down. And the opposite of him is, seeing that it was a human, Stark, who was overreacting, stopped screaming. Or because the fear in his heart disappeared a lot, and then his unconscious poisonous tongue talent was triggered. Tony looked at Ferrucci carefully, and then instinctively spoke. "I haven't seen such a bright bald head for a long time. Not a single hair." Hearing this, Russell suddenly looked over with a shocked face, and almost shouted a lying groove. "Big brother, brave or you brave, awesome." Russell silently gave Tony a thumbs up in his heart, and then silently took a few steps away from Tony. Don't burden yourself when this product dies. Outside, Ferrucci seemed to be hit by Tony's words, and his body paused obviously. Seeing this, Russell's face changed, and he immediately pointed at Tony to clear the relationship. "I don't know him very well." Gui ignored Russell, and then walked into the house casually. Tony didn't feel anything wrong with what he had just said, but began to worry about his situation again. After all, the new bald head doesn't look very friendly, so it won't be to divide his brain. Or Harpy is good, there is no brain, there is no need to worry about this kind of thing at all. Just as Tony was slandering his fat bodyguard in his heart, the next moment he heard the bald woman say to himself, "You can go, Tony Stark." This time, she just found that something was wrong for the other party, but it seemed that she was worried about it. Here, Tony just wanted to say that he was still tied, but found that the rope had fallen off his body. He first looked at the masked man who kidnapped him, saw that the other party did not move, and decisively rushed out of the room. Whatever the reason is, if only he could survive. And at the moment of running out of the room, it seemed that because he was too anxious, he tripped under his feet. Then because the start was too strong, Tony's whole body flew out, and then fell heavily on the ground. Although it hurt and ate a mouthful of sand, Tony resisted getting up and continued to run farther away. Inside the room here, Russell's face twitched. Boy, the legend that the Supreme Mage has a small heart and eyes is indeed true. What he felt just now was so real. The trip under Tony's feet was obviously Gu Yi's hands and feet. This fall was not light. He clearly heard the sound of Tony's ribs cracking, and it was already calculated that he didn't drop the arc reactor out. Tony's goods are also hard, and he continues to run without saying a word, which is also a ruthless silver. But now is not the time to think about the other party. Russell directly took off the turban on his head and looked at Gu Yi very politely. Furuchi paced slowly and sat down in the chair before, and then she looked at Russell with a smile on her face. The claws of an owl, the eyes of a goat. Where is this potion recipe and how have I never heard of it? Russell immediately showed 8 teeth and smiled. Fake, all fake. I just scared the Stark who liked the smelly mouth and then released him. Gu nodded. She did see that the person in front of her did not have the intention to kill, otherwise Tony would have died a long time ago. And the other party's style is obviously not the smelly wizard who likes flesh and blood in South America, and the spirit body is very light. Of course, she was most interested in another thing. The expulsion spell outside the door is very good. It is not bad than the spell that Karmatage has explored for thousands of years, and I studied it myself. Russell nodded without hesitation. The world does not, that's its own. Of course, he mainly wants to show that he is more talented, and at the moment this situation is not guaranteed, he will gain Gu Yi's favor. As for from the heart, that's simply standing and talking without back pain. You ask a big guy like Mephisto to touch numbness? When facing the Supreme Mage, it is better to be meticulous and not shameful. Gu nodded a little, did not say anything on his lips, but was still a little surprised in his heart. She had lived for thousands of years, and had indeed never seen this casting property and similar spells, but she did not doubt Russell's words. And even if it's fake, it doesn't matter, at the moment it is indeed the other party alone, there is no difference. The turban is deformed? Furuchi asked again. Russell did not answer but shook his turban, and suddenly the white gauze turned into a flying bird, and then flared his wings to fly out. Furuchi was not speaking, but his heart was not calm. It was also the first time she had seen a young man with such a good talent for magic, casting spells without traces, using magic power to move through the clouds and water, as if she was a master who had used magic for hundreds of years. In fact, she has a good eye, and Dumbledore's casting is at this level. Maybe. Furuchi looked deeply into Russell's eyes, until he suddenly nodded more than 10 seconds later, and then opened a portal and left without saying anything. Seeing that the other party welded a portal and left like this, Russell breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. But he was still a little uneasy inside. This old lady's last look was obviously a little wrong. Russell didn't dare to think about it, and a phantom transfiguration disappeared in place. And just after he left, the green light in the room flickered, and Furuchi appeared in place again. At this moment, she looked at the place where Russell disappeared, and there was a stunning look in her eyes, and she suddenly muttered involuntarily, "What a bonus. Maybe this time there is an opportunity to have an extra layer of security, and you don't have to put all the pressure on Strange." In the next second, Gu Yi did not stay, and directly opened the portal and left. Episode 9. A military base. Shortly after a transport plane landed, Tony, who had a thick bandage around his upper body, was carried out on a stretcher. At this time, Pepper and Harpy, who had been waiting for a long time, hurried to greet them. Tony raised his head slightly, looking at the little Pepper with red eyes, and a trace of comfort finally appeared in his injured heart, and there was a warm feeling of coming home in his heart. However, the next plot is skewed. This time, even if Tony didn't want to have a physical exam, the doctor who accompanied him told him that he probably had a broken rib. Tony was embarrassed to say that he fell flat, and directly buckled the pot on the militant who kidnapped him, intending to die without proof. Then he quickly explained what he had thought about all the way. The first is, of course, to buy a cheeseburger, which he will eat after a medical examination in the hospital. The second is to buy books about wizards, the more the better. After being tied up for the second time before, he is now uncontrollably curious about wizards in addition to his armor. Especially the other party's shining sparks and clear spring water, he is still unforgettable. In New York City, Russell, who was sitting in Uncle Mai's shop eating ice cream, looked satisfied. At this point, his system panel shows that the number of exchange points is 758. It is worthy of being the man who ended Thanos, and such a change contributed more than 400 exchange points. Russell was a little excited in his heart, and with more than 200 points, he could unlock new character cards. And he already has a plan. It is estimated that it will not be long. As night falls, Hell's Kitchen begins to glow with his own spirit. Gangsters, gangs, street stations, all sorts of contraband. Only if you can't think of it, there is nothing that is not here. And Russell's goal is here, or it should be the king of the underground here, Jinha. However, in his eyes, the other party is not a gangster boss, but a walking exchange point. In the original plot, the other party was killed after Avengers 4. But now Russell decided to be kind and send the other party to heaven in advance. NYPD should thank me, and I don't know if there is a bounty." After muttering a word, Russell walked into a dark alley with no people. In the next second, his figure instantly entangled and disappeared in the night, and when he reappeared, he had already arrived outside a 4-story window. Then the figure flashed again and entered the room. After yesterday's inquiry and the plot of his own memories, Russell didn't have much effort to determine the location of Jinha. Right now it's the top floor of the other party's biggest bar. The lower 3 floors are normal business, and further down there are 2 underground floors, where illegal business is carried out. And the top floor, which is Kim and usually rests, is not there at this time. Russell didn't know if the other party was having fun or talking about business below, or if he didn't come at all today. But he doesn't care. If the other party doesn't come today, he will continue clearly. Anyway, wait for the other party. After a few observations, Russell walked to the bar, and then unceremoniously opened a bottle of whiskey that looked expensive and poured himself a glass. And then, the next second he squirted out, "This thing smells of kerosene that people drink?" Russell shook his head slightly, but after searching for a long time and not finding happy water, he could only open a bottle of red wine and drink it. As time passed, Russell began to feel bored. The next second, he simply stomped his foot, and suddenly a floor tile quickly turned into a recliner and sat directly on it. Midnight. The door to the top floor of the bar suddenly opened, and a stout golden man walked in with a drunken cane. Then he chased his men away impatiently, then went to the sofa and sat down. A moment later, the man suddenly spoke to the empty room in an irritated tone. "Didn't anyone tell you that you would die without my permission to enter here?" Plop! A figure descends from the dome full of pipes and then stands firmly on the ground. Jean, he looked at the man dressed in black in front of him, wearing a black cloth wrapped to cover his eyes, and the anger in his eyes rose again. "It's you bug again. Even if you go to find the Hand Association, you even dare to come to my trouble. It seems that some people have forgotten who is the underground king of this city." At this moment, Jean is like an angry lion. But Daredevil was not afraid at all, but looked straight at the other party and asked coldly, "Illegal immigrants and drugs at the Hands Association have something to do with you, right? You think I'll tell you?" Jean also showed an idiotic look, and in the next second, at a speed that this size should not have, he crashed towards Daredevil like a brown bear. However, Daredevil, who has radar senses, is not a weak person. In the blink of an eye, the two fought together. But in the end, it was Jean who was better than him, finding the opportunity to punch Daredevil in the chest, and the latter suddenly retreated and crashed into the wooden bar. But just before Daredevil reached the wooden bar, his body stopped unreasonably. At a glance, his body bends backwards, as if hitting a transparent spherical object. Click! With a clear cracking sound, a dark blue transparent shield appeared, and then the fragmentation dissipated. The next second, Russell sat up. He yawned, then spoke to the 2 stunned men in front of him. "Don't stop, this is out of sight, isn't it?" Episode 10. Kim and a brief shock is followed by a rage. As for the threat, he didn't think the bluff in front of him could pose any threat to him. This is just another bug that only hides in the shadows and only annoys people. As for the strange blue shield just now, he thought it was just a technological prop that could be invisible. Who sent you? Hand rendezvous? CIA? Or S.H.I.E.L.D., or maybe you're a bullshit vigilante? Jean asked viciously, the threat overflowing. However, in the face of Jinha's questioning, Russell did not reply. He looked as if the other party did not exist, then turned his head to look at Daredevil, who had rolled to the side and made a defensive stance, and asked, "Lawyer Ma, aren't you going to continue?" Friendly reminder, you won't have a chance to ask questions in a while? Matt carefully recalled the memory in his mind and found that he had never seen the person in front of him, and he could not judge whether the other party was friend or foe for a while. Seeing that Daredevil did not speak, Russell shook his head with some regret. "Since you don't answer, then forget it." The next second, he looked at Kim and showed a sincere smile. "Everyone must be sleepy in the middle of the night. Then I'll make a long story short. Mr. Kim do you have any last words to explain?" As soon as these words came out, the entire top floor of the bar fell into a deathly silence. Matt frowned, and suddenly felt that the person in front of him was a little too arrogant. Jean is not an ordinary person. The opponent's physical fitness is several times that of a normal person, and even a small caliber bullet cannot penetrate the opponent's muscles. Even if it was him, today he didn't want to secretly hide to see if he could hear some key secrets. In general, he was not optimistic about the mysterious person who suddenly appeared in front of him. At this time, Jean as a party, was already laughed at by this sentence. The man stared at Russell with a dead gaze, and he couldn't stop sneering. "It seems that I have been too kind in recent years, so much so that Hell's Kitchen seems to have forgotten the fear of being dominated by me, and even a cat and a dog dare to provoke me." In the next second, Jean shook his neck, clenched his sandbag-sized fist, and showed a cruel smile. "Boy, next I will smash your limbs to smithereens. I hope you can still be so tough by then. Don't worry, I won't let you die soon. I'll treat you next." And, seeing that Jean was still saying cruel words, Russell scratched his head helplessly, and then asked a little puzzled, "Did I say you villains like long stories so much? Find death." Jean couldn't hold back any longer, first cursed angrily, and then rushed forward like a tank. And the next moment, he also found that the other party was still in place and motionless, as if he was frightened and stupid by his own momentum, and he was indeed a proper fool. Seeing this scene, the daredevil on the side changed his face, and he still didn't hold back from opening his mouth to remind, "Be careful with his power, don't be hard." But before he finished speaking, he sensed that stranger raised his arm. In the next moment, a creepy energy appeared for him. Rumble. A loud bang was followed by more than a dozen heavy objects hitting the ground. Daredevil's open mouth froze in the air until a hint of rust appeared, and he bent down sharply and vomited. At this moment, Matt's face was full of fear, because he knows what's going on. The Gene, who was called the king of the entire New York underground, was blown up into pieces of meat by just one finger of the young man, and he couldn't die anymore. It's even scarier than a horror story. At this moment, he finally understood what the other party's phrase "you won't have a chance in a while" meant. Indeed, can I still make a pair of pieces of meat open their mouths? Who the hell are you? Matt asked with nausea and panic in his heart. And looking at Daredevil's terrified expression, Russell was a little speechless, although the effect of the smashing curse was somewhat unexpected to him. But what I can see is not disgusting. Are you blind overreacting? However, what Russell didn't know was that due to the sensitivity of the radar senses, Matt could clearly feel every flesh and blood that was still squirming slightly, as well as the incomparably clear smell of blood. Even if he was Daredevil, it was the first time he had this experience, and it couldn't have been worse. However, Russell did not have the idea of communicating with this horse lawyer, and left directly with a phantom shift. And his instant disappearance is even more terrifying in the eyes of Matt, who can't see it, just like the evil spirit in a horror story. Matt shook his head fiercely, trying to sober himself up a little, and then quickly moved his feet to leave this terrifying place. But when he walked to the window, the ruthless Daredevil still didn't hold back. His empty eyes were full of shock that had not yet dissipated, as well as a thick emotion. No one could have imagined that a famous king of the underworld in the entire New York underworld of Waytown, Gene, died tragically in silence, which is really fate. For a moment, Matt Murdock suddenly felt that it was good to be a lawyer.